Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Burman. This is The Hill on News Nation. So not Chicago, rather Memphis. The National Guard and more headed to Tennessee's second largest city. President Trump making that announcement just moments ago.
I'm signing a presidential memorandum to establish the Memphis Safe Task Force, and it's very important because of the crime that's going on, not only in Memphis, in many cities, and we're going to take care of all of them, step by step, just like we did in D.C.
Plus, the vice president takes to the microphone for 3 hours. J.D. Vance filling in for Charlie Kirk. We'll show you what the VP said. Plus, we are live tonight with the very latest on the investigation. Also tonight, does the beat continue? The president suggests a deal is done with China to keep TikTok up and running here in the U.S. Kevin O'Leary, trying to buy TikTok, joins us live tonight here on The Hill. Plus, the governor endorses the socialist. Why New York's Kathy Hochul says she is backing Zohran Mamdani to run New York City. How the Democratic Party is reacting tonight. But first tonight here on The Hill, surging in Memphis, you could say. A live look right now, Memphis, Tennessee, where President Trump says the feds are heading in. Surging to Tennessee's second largest city. Memphis also led, by the way, when it came to violent crime in 2024, according to FBI data, when you look at the biggest cities in this country. To be deployed as well, the Tennessee National Guard, which currently has north of 10,000 members in total in that state. No word yet, though, on how many might take to the streets of Memphis. It comes after the president's threats to send troops into other cities outside of Washington, D.C., like Chicago and Baltimore. But local officials in Memphis pushing back on this idea ahead of the announcement.
I want to be clear, I did not ask for the National Guard, and I don't think it's the way to drive down crime. However, that decision has been made.
Team coverage tonight as the president expands his crime crackdown. Hannah Brandt live at Union Station here in Washington. But we begin with our Kelly Meyer live at the White House on what the president just unveiled moments ago. Kelly.
Yeah, hey there, Blake. So President Trump just signed the paperwork to create what he's calling the, quote, Memphis Safe Task Force. That will bring to Memphis much of the same playbook used here in Washington, D.C., deploying the National Guard, FBI, DEA, ICE, U.S. Marshals, all to the Tennessee city.
This team will deploy the full powers of federal law enforcement agencies and enforcement generally to restore public safety and get dangerous career criminals off of our streets. We're going to get them off. In 2024, Memphis had the highest violent crime rate, the highest property crime rate, and the third highest murder rate of any city in the nation.
And fact check, that is true. Memphis had the highest violent crime rate for a large city in 2024, but we are hearing overall crime in Memphis is down. That's according to the Memphis Crime Commission. Now, President Trump says he is thinking about Chicago next and, quote, we are going to have to go very big there. He also mentioned potentially going to St. Louis. And when pressed on how he would send the National Guard to Chicago without support from the governor or mayor, Trump said local police would support them. Blake?
Kelly Meyer, live for us tonight over at the White House. Kelly, thank you. Back with us here on The Hill once again. The congressman from the state of Tennessee, Congressman David Kustoff, Republican, represents parts of Memphis and the surrounding areas. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight. We spoke the other day. Now the president makes it official. He says, as it relates to some of these cities, we need to save these places. Does Memphis need to be saved?
Well, look, Memphis has a high crime rate. You cited that. The public knows that. The president knows that. And my constituents who live in Memphis are generally supportive of the president's actions to combat violent crime. Everybody, I don't care what political party, who they are, they want to be safe when they go shop. They want to be safe when they're in their neighborhoods. By initiating what President Trump has done with this Memphis task force today, that's going to ensure that people do feel safer because there'll be more law enforcement literally on the streets of Memphis. So that's a positive thing. That'll be short term, like what we saw in Washington, D.C. But look, in Washington, D.C., it had a positive benefit. We've seen the crime rates go down pretty dramatically in these 30 days that the National Guard was on the streets of Washington, D.C.
You mentioned the short-term aspect of this. Here's what the president said. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
This will be your proudest moment when we see you in 4 or 5 weeks, maybe sooner. You're going to see numbers that will drop and plummet like you haven't, just like we did in D.C. They plummeted. Nobody could even believe it.
So the president there to Governor Lee basically saying in 4 to 5 weeks, we'll get this all squared away. Do you think that's the time frame here?
Well, I don't know. Well, first of all, we need to know how long the National Guard will actually be deployed in Memphis. I do want to applaud Governor Lee, though, because he has sent a number of state troopers to Memphis over the last year, and he announced in the last week that there are an additional 50 state troopers that'll be in Memphis. That's important because that relieves the Memphis police and the Shelby County Sheriff's deputies from having to patrol routine traffic duties. The Tennessee Highway Patrol will do that on the interstate. I do think, Blake, that longer term, we need in Memphis and in West Tennessee more federal agents, like FBI agents, like deputy U.S. Marshals. I also think that we need more assistant U.S. attorneys. I was a former United States attorney back in the Western District of Tennessee. We need more federal prosecutors in that area. If we can do that, medium term and longer term, Memphis and Shelby County in West Tennessee is going to be a good and safe place to live.
Congressman David Kustoff, I have more questions for you. You have to run to the vigil there for Charlie Kirk up on Capitol Hill. We'll let you head out. When that happens, by the way, we'll show those images live. Congressman, want to respect the time, appreciate the time tonight here on the Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Of course. All right, so the president shifting his focus to Memphis, as we just heard, but he's certainly not forgetting about the current home where he lives. The president's crime crackdown in Washington, D.C. continues, making some new statements today. The president did, and covering it for us tonight are Hannah Brandt, just about a few hundred yards away over at Union Station. Hannah?
Hi, Blake. You're right. The president is threatening to declare another national emergency to federalize D.C. if those local police officers here don't cooperate with immigration enforcement. Now, let's take a step back so we can talk about where things stand right now. We do still have National Guard troops patrolling here in Washington, D.C. Their deployment has been extended through November, and we've seen some of them patrolling today around Union Station where we're at right now. But that national emergency authority that the president had for 30 days, that expired last week. And that's where this drama comes in. Because when that expired, we saw D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser basically say that she doesn't expect the police to any longer cooperate with immigration enforcement efforts, saying basically that it would go back to a pre-emergency status quo. Listen to what she said.
Immigration enforcement is not what MPD does. And with the end of the emergency, it won't be what MPD does in the future.
Now, President Trump has been fairly complimentary of Mayor Bowser throughout this kind of back and forth in this operation, saying that he appreciates that she's done a lot to cooperate with these federal efforts. But that comment made him very upset, prompted this Truth Social post where he said, if I allowed this to happen, crime would come roaring back. To the people and businesses of Washington, D.C., don't worry, I'm with you. I won't allow this to happen. Adding, I'll call a national emergency and federalize if necessary. Now, of course, we did reach out to Mayor Bowser about this. We haven't heard back her comments about the president's threat. She is expected, though, to testify on Capitol Hill this week. Blake.
Hannah Brandt, live for us, just down the road. Hannah, thank you. With me now, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former chief of staff in the first Trump White House, and Dan Cannon, former Battleground States director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Gentlemen, hello. Happy Monday. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Burman.
I picked up on a couple things that the president said, Mick. I'll start with you. He repeatedly said we need to save these places, meaning the major cities in this country.
Yeah.
The last things that he said was we want to make these cities safe, but Memphis is second, not Chicago, and I wonder if the message is sort of meeting the reality here of where he can and cannot send the National Guard?
Well, I think the reality was that Chicago was going to fight, and there was going to be a court battle that could drag out 6 straight months. And if Trump really wants to help some of these cities turn the corner on crime, why waste your time in the courts? Go someplace where they want you.
What about that message, we're going to save these places?
Oh, that's Trump. That's Trump language. Are they going to fall off the face of the earth if we don't go in there? No, but that's just.
I guess what I'm saying is it feels like a new theme from him, right? Like this is where he's landed on this. He feels that the federal government needs to be in these major cities.
I'm looking at Mr. Canada now, and I know what he knows. I know what I'm going to say, which is that this is solid gold real estate for Republicans going into the midterm cycle. If we can make this election about law and order and crime and who's doing something about it, the Republicans are going to do quite well.
I don't disagree with that, especially considering what he has on the docket other than this, because when this crime push first started, it was the bad jobs report in August, it was the Epstein files, let's take control of the issue, says Trump, and put the National Guard in places where I can look tough on crime. My issue is not so much the National Guard being in these cities, these states. I mean, a Republican governor, one, doesn't need Trump. He can mobilize National Guard. He controls National Guard in his state. This is more about the optics for Trump. But my issue is the same point that the congressman made.
Yeah, you were nodding your head along. You're a Democrat.
Sure.
You were nodding your head along with, I saw out of the corner of my eye, with David Kustoff, who's a Republican. What specifically?
Absolutely. Same point that was made by the Attorney General of Illinois when this first started in Chicago, which is that there are law enforcement agencies with trained personnel on drug trafficking, on gun trafficking, that really materially matter on crime. And in Illinois, and I imagine in Memphis and in Tennessee, they've been looking for more support, not less, from the ATF, for example. And he said that quite clearly. I want more ATF agents. I want folks that know what drug trafficking, gun trafficking looks like. There's so many root causes of crime in a place like Memphis. It's not just there are bad people there, and once the National Guard comes, we root them all out. There's education, there's poverty, there's addiction, there's trafficking, there's gangs. All of that takes a coordinated federal response and state response. The problem with the National Guard is they're not trained for any of that, but they're simply the lever Trump can pull to look tough.
So take the National Guard out of it, Mick. I wonder if this is sort of the blueprint going forward. FBI, DEA, ATF, you name it, agencies on down the list going into major cities, wherever they may be. The president today, for example, brought up St. Louis.
Are you asking me if we're going to see another White House press conference at some point in the future talking about crime in a city? Yes, we are. We absolutely are going to. Yeah, I think that's an easy bet. He got an hour worth of coverage on a topic that's important to him. I don't agree with Dan with the way things are going, but I'll agree with Dan that, he'd rather talk about crime than other topics right now. It's where they are winning the argument, including with swing voters. Keep in mind the polling data that we had on this program, 4 weeks ago, that 2/3 of the people in Washington, D.C. thought it was a terrible idea, but at the same time, they thought that the Trump program had actually made the city safer. At the end of the day, those people are going to vote.
These two gentlemen later in the show, Dan, Mick.
We'll be here.
Both. Yep.
Thank you, Blake.
You'll be here. All right, still to come. Other side of the break. A vigil up on Capitol Hill any moment. You heard me reference this to the congressman. Set to begin moments from now for Charlie Kirk. Once that happens, we will take you there live. Plus, the U.S., China, and TikTok. Is there a deal in place for the popular social media app? Kevin O'Leary live on the other side of the break. Who is the possible buyer? And President Trump calls it a shocking endorsement. So who's throwing support behind Zohran Mamdani? When we return, I'm Blake Burman. Other side of the break, 4 minutes away. The very latest in the investigation with Charlie Kirk's murder. All right, it is 6:18 here in Washington. A live look right now up on Capitol Hill. Of course, you see the House Speaker Mike Johnson flanked there by several lawmakers, many of them from within his own party. Left side of your screen, Steve Scalise, for example. Right side, Tom Emmer. They make up Republican leadership. There is about to be a vigil up on Capitol Hill any moment now. We saw the moving ceremony here in Washington, D.C. yesterday evening over at the Kennedy Center. A funeral to take place later this week, and this vigil now up on the Hill.
A range of emotions that have been felt by the American people and, frankly, by leaders in the nation's capital. Sadness, of course, unspeakable grief that people have felt. Many of the people here assembled in Statuary Hall today were personal friends of Charlie Kirk, knew him well, watched his ministry and his organization develop over the years. And then the sadness for so many of us, turned to anger, and there's been a mixture of emotions that included fear on behalf of a lot of people around the country. This heinous political violence, an assassination. Our friend Charlie did not pass away in a car accident. He was assassinated for standing for his political beliefs. And so it's, for so many of us, it has felt as if the ground has been shaken. And it's not just the people assembled here, of course. It involves students on university campuses around America and the over 3,000 chapters of Turning Point that are on university, college campuses, and high school campuses around the country, and all of the people in the network and in the conservative movement and throughout the nation that have heard Charlie's voice and felt a part of all that he was involved with, because he was on a mixture of media and his voice was heard loudly and clearly. What we do know about Charlie is that he would not want us to be overcome by despair, and would want us to carry the message forward, to honor his memory, and to expand the legacy they left behind. I've spoken, as many of us have, at a lot of memorial services over the last several days, some in my home state. We had one here at the Kennedy Center last night, as you all know. But we felt it was appropriate for us to gather here in the nation's capital, in Statuary Hall, to mark the passing of our friend, to share in a moment of reflection and a prayer together, which we'll have in a few moments after a few of the leaders speak here briefly. But I've summarized in every public remark that I've given that I think the best way to honor the memory of Charlie Kirk is to live as he lived. And I've encouraged young people to do two things: advance his principles and adopt his approach. The principles that Charlie stood for were faith and freedom and family and virtue and patriotism and America, which he believed, and we all believe, is the greatest nation in the history of the world. Those are good principles to advance. And you honor Charlie by doing so. You honor your country, but also to adopt his approach. Because Charlie was a happy warrior, and he was not angry at anybody about any of those things that he was advancing. He never hated anyone. In fact, in Charlie's own words, he was motivated by love. He believed in the words of Scripture. He identified himself to be a Christ follower, and he tried to model that every single day in everything that he did. And as I remarked a couple of times already this week, what I loved about Charlie the most is even though he could win any debate, he never held it against anyone on the other side of the table. To the contrary, he was the very first person to reach out a hand of friendship or to put his arm around the shoulder of someone who was on the complete opposite side of the political spectrum, philosophy or ideology, because it was about the people. That's what Charlie represented, and his legacy will go on. Scripture reminds us that we should not be overcome by evil, but we should overcome evil with good. That is the legacy of Charlie Kirk.
The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, as we listen live here on the Hill. Of course, Steve Scalise, the number 2 in the House there. Mike Johnson saying to so many of us, it feels like the ground has shaken. Sadness turned to anger, turned to fear. With me now, former communications aide to Senator Lindsey Graham, VP of Push Digital Group, T.W. Origi, and former White House Press Office Chief of Staff, Yemisi Egbawali, who is a Democratic strategist. T.W., I'll start with you. We saw the moving moments last night. We know that the funeral expected later this week. And then Statuary Hall, we know this, but for those of you at home who might not know that, it's just a beautiful part of that building behind me, right outside the chamber where they're speaking right now.
Yes, and surrounding that building are statues of great Americans from all 50 states, which scatter throughout the Capitol building. I thought Speaker Johnson, once again, just shows the grace and humanity that he has and what makes him such a great leader. You know, he talked about combating that evil with good. That's the message we want to take away from here. Charlie Kirk always said the moment we stop talking is when violence happens. Speaker Johnson was right to double down on that we need to reach out to people we disagree with and build bridges.
MSCR Joe Khalil reporting that there are at least 2 Democratic lawmakers in that gathering there, just to show the bipartisanship behind all this.
Yeah, I think it's great that Democrats are there standing as one with Republicans because political violence, as we know, affects both sides. And in the same way that many Republicans supported Democrats when the representative Melissa Hortman was killed, unfortunately, in her home with her husband and her dog, I think at the same time, Democrats can divorce some of the things that they may have disagreed with that Charlie Kirk said and look at our political climate because, we're watching Steve Scalise talk right now. He is somebody who's been a victim of political violence.
June 14th, 2017, the congressional baseball game where he survived a shooting there. Our coverage continues here on News Nation, Yemisi, TW. Thank you. Other side of the break, we are joined by Kevin O'Leary. TikTok, it seems like it's here to stay. Who is the possible buyer when we return? 6:30 on the dot here in Washington. Welcome back. Live look at the White House after the administration announced what they say is a framework deal with China to avert a TikTok ban here in the U.S. Follows trade talks between both sides in Europe over the weekend. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, saying this to reporters today.
We have a framework for a TikTok deal. The two leaders, President Trump and Party Chair Xi, will speak on Friday to complete the deal.
So far, the road to giving TikTok a permanent home in the U.S. has had a bunch of hurdles. Last year, President Biden signed bipartisan legislation. There were Democrats and Republicans, by and large, who supported it, requiring ByteDance to sell TikTok to a U.S. company within a year or essentially be shut down. In January, the Supreme Court upheld that law, but President Trump has been extending the deadline here, as there could be a buyer down the road. Millions of Americans would be impacted by whatever ends up happening. A Pew Research survey last year found that a third of all U.S. adults use TikTok, 63% of teens between 13 and 17. Bottom line, there's probably hundreds of millions of Americans on this. I don't know anyone who has been following this closer than that man right there, friend of the show, chairman of O'Leary Ventures, Kevin O'Leary, with us once again here on the Hill. Kevin, nice to see you. Thanks for being with us. I want to know if there's a buyer and who it is.
Well, let me give you the numbers. 172 million Americans use TikTok.
Okay.
Absolutely huge. There are a plethora of buyers, unlimited buyers. Every private equity dog and guy that runs a private equity firm wants a piece of this deal. So no problem on the buying side. The problem is there's no seller until 48 hours ago when we got the indication that Xi, who actually controls this company through a golden share structure, this is basically his personal decision what he wants to do with ByteDance. Now, the numbers go like this. To make it easy for you to understand, and everybody listening, let's call ByteDance minimum worth $300 billion globally, of which around 0.5% is in the United States. Call that 10%. So this is probably a $30 billion deal. And does it have suitors? 100%.
Is the government one of them?
Everybody that owns ByteDance now that is an American company, there's plenty of them, would like to take their shares and roll them into the American deal. So that's hurdle number one, because we know that Xi is going to be allowed to own up to 20%. That's a rule we already have in media companies. A foreigner can own 20%. So Xi gets to own 20. The other 80 has to be owned by an American syndicate. Who's in that syndicate? We're going to find out probably this week. What the price is, probably find out this week too. But here's the challenge. There's 172 million accounts on essentially what has been deemed by the Supreme Court and Congress as a spyware platform. You got to rewrite the code from scratch. Luckily, that's easy to do with AI these days, but it's not overnight. Then you got to transfer every account on a new platform. So let's call that 11 to 18 month process. So we're going to have to get an extension from Trump, which I think he's going to do, assuming Xi says, yes, I agree to the fact that I'll let this Chinese brand called ByteDance operate in the United States without my Chinese spyware algorithm, and I'll be able to own 20% of it. He's got to agree with that first. I think he will. That's the indication we're part of a bigger trade deal. Then the dance begins. What's it worth? 40 billion, don't know yet. Who's in the syndicate? Don't know yet. But the transfer period, I think, is at least 11 to 18 months. And you got to write the algorithms from scratch, probably with an oversee, like the Department of Defense or Justice, somebody looking at what's being written to make sure there's no spyware left in there.
But I heard, yeah, but Kevin, here's what the Treasury Secretary said today. He said, quote, they're interested in Chinese characteristics of the app, which they think are soft power. And I'm going, Chinese characteristics of the app. I've heard national security. Does that square? Does that satisfy?
No, it won't work because you've got Senator Cotton on down with the China hawks that have been trying to shut this thing down for quite a while. Trump's done what he can to keep it going, and at the end of the day, he can keep extending with executive order, but at some point, he has to abide by the law. And the only way to abide by the law is to strip out the spyware, the Chinese spyware. That's a Xi decision. Lots of buyers, no seller yet. I guess we'll find out before midnight on the 17th. If Xi says, yes, I'm willing to let this live with American software driving it, and I can't probe into Americans' information as you can now. I mean, there's no debate about it. TikTok is spyware. Other countries are going to watch this deal if it happens and probably follow suit, allowing it to be controlled without it stripping out the Chinese spyware. By the way, TikTok, as it works in the United States, is not even permitted in China. So, you got to think about it this way. This thing is spying on Americans, and that day is about to end. Now, one or two things are going to happen. It's going to go dark at midnight. I don't think so, though. Okay. I think what we're hearing from Trump is, I got a deal here, and if Xi says yes, let the games begin.
Kevin, do you think the U.S. government, I mean, we've seen the Trump administration take stakes, so it's not a crazy concept or even question to ask. Do you think if there's a deal, and yes, private is involved, whether it be venture, private equity, whoever, but also do you think the U.S. government would take a stake in this?
I don't know what vehicle that would be in. I mean, does that mean the Treasury owns the shares? There's no sovereign wealth fund yet. I think that's a little complicated. Does Congress actually want that? I think it's better just to put it in American hands, 80%, let them start paying taxes, hire Americans. I think you probably have to clean out the C-suite, no Chinese guys there. There'll be a bunch of rules, but at the end of the day, if Xi can own 20%, it's face saving, and the rules are the rules. You're allowed to have foreign ownership as long as it's approved. And so I think this deal will be approved by Congress. I mean, there's never been anything like this in the history of America. You've got the Supreme Court weighing in, you got Congress calling it spyware, and yet it's one of the biggest platforms in the world. Of course there's buyers. This thing's probably worth a lot of money, and if it's brought under American control, it could be a great platform to sell advertising to consumers on. It's already proven it can do that. And of course, strip out the spyware.
I guess, Kevin, as the president always says and his team always says, we'll see what happens. We'll leave it there. Kevin O'Leary with us once again here on The Hill. Talk to you soon. Appreciate it as always, Kevin.
Take care.
You as well. All right, still to come on the other side. I know Kevin's watching this story as well. All in for Zoran? Is that what's going on in New York? Kathy Hochul, the governor there, writing an op-ed, kind of lukewarm. I'm going to explain to you on the other side of the break why this is kind of like Trump 2016 when we return.
Here comes Batya.
The folks over at NewsNation, they're very smart. They took a look at you and said, get her over here.
American journalist and author Batya Angar Sargon joins NewsNation. Batya premieres Saturday, 4/3 Central, only on NewsNation.
When you look at the agitators, you look at the scum that speaks so badly of our country, the American flag burnings all over the place, that's the left, that's not the right.
President Trump over the weekend describing the left, as you heard there, when he was asked about Charlie Kirk's killing. The president telling reporters that some left-leaning groups would be investigated. The president saying as much inside the Oval Office today. Kirk's killing has sent shockwaves through political circles, prompting, for example, increased security and many leaders to ask who is to blame. The president's comments got the attention of the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro, a Democrat who was targeted himself in an arson attack earlier this year. The governor saying comments like those, quote, only create more divisions, saying violence transcends party lines, and the way to address it and have true peaceful debate is for leaders to speak and act with moral clarity. That, he says, needs to start with the president. Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, News Nation contributor, former chief of staff in the first Trump administration. T.W. Origi back with us, VP Push Digital Group. Yemisi Egbawali is a Democratic strategist. And Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States Director for the Biden-Harris campaigns. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. Love this crew I got alongside me. Mick, it seems like we're at the point now. We saw the president in the Oval today talk about investigating certain groups, and now the conversation has shifted to who's to blame, who's not to blame, who needs to tone it down, etc.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to Donald Trump to be the unifier in chief, that's not his shtick. He doesn't have that gear, right? He's going to do what he's going to do, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. They didn't elect a unifier. He didn't run as one. Of course, Barack Obama ran as one. He didn't unite anybody. Joe Biden was supposedly this great moderate who could do deals. He didn't unite anybody. So traditionally, folks have said, "Oh, we need a president who's a unifier," but I don't think that's existed in this country since at least George Bush II.
Yeah, I agree. I think we all have a cross to bear in this change in tone and turning the temperature down. I was heartened to see John Fetterman's comments, Bernie Sanders' comments, and others who are saying maybe we should stop calling them Nazis, stop calling them fascists, start saying they should be dealt with appropriately. Look, Donald Trump was shot at, had 2 assassination attempts on his life. Charlie Kirk was incredibly close to him. He feels this personally. And the millions of people who Charlie Kirk brought into the conservative fold feel like they're personally under attack, and that's understandable. Mick is right about President Trump, and we'll see how this thing moves forward. To turn the temperature down, to let peace come on earth, begins with each of us. We all need to do a better job.
I think messaging comes from the top, and it's disappointing that President Trump is the person that's going to be delivering a lot of that messaging. I hope that he remains consistent in asking for peace amongst all of this political violence, but I do think it's going to be incumbent upon Congress and a lot of these members who they themselves are at risk with this, right? We've seen multiple members of Congress have to face security concerns of their own, and so
they have to be thinking
of their own personal
we just saw a
safety.
live shot of Steve Scalise tonight.
They couldn't get through a moment of silence without yelling at each other.
Yeah.
Seriously.
The other day, last week.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean.
Oh, no. And so I know people like Congresswoman Nancy Mace don't want us to all have this conversation, but I think for a lot of members, for their own personal safety, they really have to think about their families and also about the political climate as a whole.
I agree with all of that, honestly. And as much as I think that President Trump should, even though he won't, I think Mick is right. He's not going to find this gear that he's not had ever in his life to be this unifier in this moment. It'd be great if he would. I hope that other leaders, if not him, do take that tone. And the thing I think is very complicated about this is that more than at any time in our history, it's not just about what our leaders say, because we don't have the 90 million viewership Oval Office address on one network any longer. Right. We are very disparate in how we get our news sources. And what happens is that there are dark places on the internet that foster, very extreme thoughts. And there's a horseshoe in politics where at that bottom of that horseshoe, extreme left, extreme right, it's really just nihilistic. There's not really, I wouldn't say the shooter in Minneapolis or the shooter in Utah necessarily has some political ideology. It's just a nihilistic ideology at some level. But that surfaces, and then the algorithm takes the worst, most incendiary stuff and puts it right in front of your face. And I don't think that Republicans who think that left-leaning actors are the cause of violence are necessarily lying. I just think the algorithm is serving them so much of that they assume that's true. And the same thing happens on the other side, that we see the worst stuff from Republicans. We can't solve this unless we get serious about it.
And like we were just talking about backstage, it's also given a platform for people to externalize the internal thoughts that they never would have uttered out loud previously. Things that people go to therapy for, Catholics go to confession for. People are now putting that out on the internet, and it's creating, just like you said, this horrible cesspool of hate.
All right, other story I wanted to get into occurred in the editorial section of the New York Times today. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, endorses Zohran Mamdani. Quote, I didn't leave my conversations with Mr. Mamdani aligned with him on every issue, but I am confident that he has the courage urgency and optimism New York City needs to lead it through the challenges of this moment. Hochul this morning. Here was Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, about the state of his party over the weekend.
They have forgotten one of the reasons why we lost in 2024. Some of the most extreme things were weaponized against that. And now some people think now we have to double down on those things, or we must become more progressive or more extreme. That's absolutely not true.
Here's some of what was interesting. Obviously, Zohran Mamdani leading the race there for the New York City mayoral race, the self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist. If you read the Hochul op-ed, it was like, while I don't agree with him on she lists all the things, I endorse him. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, it's kind of reminiscent of 2016 when Republicans had to say, well, I don't agree with Trump on everything, but he's the guy. And it's like, your side of the aisle is now dealing with what they dealt with 10 years ago.
Well, listen,
no?
Nobody in the state.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, nobody in the state of New York believes that Zohran Mamdani and Kathy Hochul have the same politics, to be clear. Like, she stood firm on anti-Semitism, on very hard push against crime. Those are things that I'm hopeful that she's going to be able to bring him in the middle, too. She is a mom from Buffalo. He's an assemblyman from Queens. They come from very different backgrounds. She's doing the grown-up thing, which is you support the person that won the election.
Isn't that the same questions they asked us
Yes.
about Trump? When are you going to stand up to Trump? How can you not speak out against it? How can you just go along for the ride? I've heard this argument before.
Right? Like, this is what...
This is it.
But he's not Trump. He's not saying incendiary things about other people. I mean, I know that everyone here wants to make...
I mean, you could think of what he said about the New York Police Department back in 2020.
He's not said that stuff.
Okay.
I think that people want to make him a boogeyman because...
Hold
on.
Fairly impressive
what he has
anti-Semitic.
focused on consistently in his campaign, and I think Fetterman's point is well taken, that Democrats should learn the lessons of 2024 and past elections. And the lesson was focus on what people can afford, focus on cost. For all what we talk about in cable news, Mamdani talks about cost relentlessly. And that's why he won so handily. And if you look at that op-ed, Blake, it's true. She kind of lists the permission structure stuff of, I'm not with you on these things, but look, you're doing some outreach and that's good. But the meat of that op-ed is, I'm really impressed with his focus on lowering costs. That's where he has been. That's why he won. And that's a lesson for Democrats.
Well, a big other part of the reason he won is because the energy of the party is with the socialist factions of that party. The base always speaks the loudest. Kathy Hochul is up for election 2 years. She wants the money. She wants the energy. She's between a rock and a hard place. This wing of the party, the Mamdani socialist wing of the party, is what the Democratic Party is becoming in larger and larger amounts.
No, the reason that he won was because Democrats, establishment Democrats, put all of their support behind Andrew Cuomo, somebody that had resigned in disgrace just a few years ago. He did not have moderate establishment candidates to go up against.
There is a
and
reason
you guys, as
AOC won.
Republicans, did not put up any real Republican candidates anyways.
We really thought we had a chance.
AOC won, and then Joe Biden won. We're not getting...
we're talking New York City.
Hold on, let me ask you this. If you were advising, because you both do Democrats, would you tell them, embrace Zohran Mamdani?
I think if you lead a party in your state, you should support the person who won that.
If you're in the state, I think you have to support the Democratic nominee. For everyone else,
When does Schumer come out for him?
I don't know that it helps Schumer or Mamdani, honestly.
That doesn't answer my question. I think Schumer has to come out and endorse him. I think he absolutely does.
All right, we'll leave it there. Election November 4th? Somewhere there. 5th? First week in November. We'll be talking about it until then, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Burman.
Appreciate it. Still to come, other side of the break. The president releases new video today. What flew out of the sky into that boat right there? I'll explain it, plus what's trending. All right, if you're just getting home, trying to catch up on today's top stories, here's what's trending right now on thehill.com. We continue to follow, as does thehill.com, the very latest in the Charlie Kirk assassination. So many headlines there, as you might imagine, including this, the FBI Director Kash Patel speaking out at one point today. In other news today, Elon Musk, how about this, buys $1 billion worth of Tesla stock. Tesla's share price now higher than it was to start the year. And then the president had a bunch to post on social media today, including this earlier this morning. He went after the NFL once again, called the kickoff rules, the new ones, ridiculous. To check out those stories and more, all you have to do, scan the QR code on your screen or head on over to thehill.com. All right, time for my take now. The commander-in-chief revealing just a little while ago that he's done it again. President Trump posting this video to his social media feed saying he ordered a strike against Venezuelan drug traffickers, cartels in international waters. Now, the video, if you keep watching, bang, there you go. Shows a boat at sea one moment, blown up the next. Now, the president writing, "Be warned, if you are transporting drugs that can kill Americans, we are hunting you." Now, as someone who grew up in South Florida and worked in news there for years, I can tell you that pursuing drug traffickers in open waters is not new. It happened all the time, will happen all the time as well. What is new, though, now are the methods. Seemingly no chase, but big ammunition. Now, there's been a debate as well about whether or not any of this or what part of this may or may not be legal. We can set that debate aside for now and look at what we actually know. The president has stepped into, you can say, new waters, redefining what it means to stop the flow of drugs on them. That's my take tonight. Coming up here on News Nation, Elizabeth Vargas reports. Of course, she is following the very latest into the investigation into the Charlie Kirk shooting suspect. Geraldo and Batia with Elizabeth just seconds away. But I thank you for watching us tonight here on The Hill. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Blake Burman. Elizabeth starts right now.